We're living through some of the most disruptive times in recent history. The job market is changing, prices are climbing, and our communities are under attack. But in the middle of all that change and chaos, there's still opportunity. The chance to decide how we move forward on purpose, with purpose, for a greater purpose. Welcome to season 5 of the Pretty Purposeful podcast. Welcome, everybody. I'm your host, Angee Mélange. And to those of you who are coming back, welcome back, Purposeful family. If you're new here, go ahead and hit that subscribe button. If you're part of our Purposeful family, go ahead and like and share this out. Hopefully you all had a great summer. If you're a part of our Purposeful family or you were here last season, then you know that my co-host, Miss Candace Mabry, announced her departure at the end of season 4. And it was bittersweet news. We have so many great memories. We've done so many great things creatively together that will go down in history as one of the best collaborations that I've ever had.
I feel so blessed, and I'm just ready to see the fruits of the hard work we're putting in to make this happen.
This summer, I spent a lot of time just keeping up with the news and just really trying to figure out, how I wanted to approach this season. I knew at the end of last season that I wanted to continue, focusing on current events. And this podcast, ultimately is about purpose and living life with intention. So with everything that's going on in our country, I just really couldn't see me coming back and not continuing that focus. Shout out to all the Black media out there. I do want to just give a shout out to Roland Martin. I definitely have kept up with his content daily, the Defiant Lawyers Network. And also, I do want to say the Midas Touch Network as well. These have been the most trustworthy sources of information and news. I just appreciate that they bring truth, facts, they stay up to date, and so that's where I'm getting my news information from. I would encourage you to do the same. But with that being said, you'll notice I using a green screen, just want to switch it up a little bit, because I am by myself now. So I do have that flexibility to, just kind of shift and pivot. Speaking of pivots, that is actually what this episode is all about. Today's episode is actually called The Power of a Purposeful Pivot. One thing that I know about pivots is that they are done with a lot of intention. You guys may have heard us speak about, when you're not intentional, life just kind of happens to you. And instead of you pivoting, you end up, hitting that rock bottom and then having no choice but to go up, right? But when you pivot, you can prevent from having to go to rock bottom, right? And starting all over. And so that is what is so powerful about a pivot. And that's the reason why I wanted to talk about that today. Considering the way that we are being affected as a collective, as well as individuals, as well as families, as well as institutions, everybody and every entity is having to pivot. It's a choice. You don't have to, but it would be wise during this type of unprecedented times that we're living in that you do choose to pivot. Now, where you pivot to, that's going to be your own personal, discovery that you need to make for yourself to determine what steps are needed to be able to purposefully pivot. Because you could pivot, but then there's a purposeful way to pivot. And we're going to get into that today. On the topic of pivots, you guys, I mentioned last season that I was super excited to start working on a music project. Now, this music project was actually something that I've been wanting to do forever. Like when I tell you it has been officially 8 years since I've released any music. And I don't think that I've ever really done it the way that I've wanted to do it because as an independent artist, I'm pretty much self-teaching myself, the ins and outs of the business and things like publishing, copyright, just even getting collaborators. I'm from Pittsburgh and I've had the opportunity to be around other artists, but I haven't had the privilege of being around another artist, a singer, a songwriter who was more experienced than me, who could really pour into me. Now, I have been in studios with other artists who are more experienced than me, but I'll just say they were men, and the focus wasn't really on helping me hone my craft during those collaborative moments. So I don't really feel that I gained much from them in terms of, developing my craft. There just really was no intention from those individuals to really pour into me and see my craft, blossom. With that being said, that has been my struggle. And I feel, moving to Atlanta where there's so many different artists and creatives, that the likelihood that I would find someone to collaborate with, it seemed like it would be greater, chance of me meeting someone. And just again, how life has gone, it really hasn't happened that way with the music. But I will say that, me meeting Candace, that was a example of how I was able to meet someone outside of my hometown that I clicked with on so many levels that we were able to produce the amazing fruit that we produced together. That being said, on the music note, I haven't had that opportunity just yet. And I feel like I really haven't put myself out there physically in spaces to be able to meet those people. Now, The reasons behind why I haven't been in those spaces, well, I'm a mom. I don't hang out like I used to back in my 20s. There's certain spaces that I might want to go to, but I'm just like, okay, I don't know, the neighborhood. I don't know the crowd. Um, so I would just stick to like going to karaoke. And that's how I would meet other talented, artists. However, again, I feel that in those spaces, I just really have not encountered someone who I felt that I could work with. I say all that to say my daughter, my child, my one and only child, she is a musician herself. She's been playing the piano since she was 5. She produces music for video games currently. But we had talked about, working on a project together because for me, it would have it's a safe space, right? I'm with my child. My child is learning from me. I'm learning from her. And then we're creating something, together that is legacy, right? So I was super excited, and the goal was to do it while she was home for the summer, and after the podcast, after the last season ended. But the closer we got to that moment of like hitting the ground and like kicking this project off, I sensed a little resistance from my daughter. And the old me, I'm gonna say the old me, the me from like, I would say 10 years ago, um, would probably had taken it personal and been upset. But something said, you know what, before you start this project, before you even break ground on this project, check in with your daughter and see if she is genuinely, wholeheartedly invested in this project. And so sure enough, we're in the studio. I checked in with her, and I it was hard for her to say that she didn't want to, but I welcomed that, because just the same as with the departure of my, former co-host, I am in a season of like radical acceptance. And I think we all have to be in this season. And so I'm sad to say that my daughter and I will not be working on a project at this time. It doesn't mean that we won't in the future, but as a mother, I felt that in that moment, even though when we're in the studio, I always tell her when we're in the studio, I don't want you to feel like I'm mommy because I don't want that to get in the way of your creativity. I don't want you to feel like if I tell you to do something or do something a different way, that you're being like, reprimanded, or, if you don't do it right, you're going to get in trouble. So I set the tone early on and said, hey, when we're in the studio, I don't want you to look at me as mommy. I want you to see me as your collaborator and artist. You're the producer. We are working together. But at that moment, when we were talking about the project, I had to take on that mommy role in that moment and just understand that I'm the adult here in this dynamic, and I'm the one who's going to be able to, I'm not going to say make the best decision, but pretty much, because I don't feel that she would have spoken up and said that she didn't wanna do it. So, I wanted to relieve her of that pressure, especially considering she's going into her sophomore year of college. There's already a lot of pressure with that, going back, having a new roommate, a new dorm, all of that. And the summer goes by so fast, So again, as a mom, I just felt that it would have been selfish of me, similar to how, again, with my former co-host, if I would have, pressured or guilt tripped, because people do that. People who aren't healed and people who are not in a season of acceptance. So I'm proud of myself. And I told my daughter, I'm like, I am not upset. Trust me. I would not want to, as much as this project means to me, I would not want to do it with anybody who's not as eager or excited as I am to get it done. So at this point, I've had to pivot. And what does that pivot look like? That pivot looks like me scaling back the focus on that project for now and really looking at everything that I have going on in my life and figuring out, what is reasonable for me to be able to manage while working a full-time job, supporting my daughter. What is really reasonable? And this podcast is something that I feel that I can manage myself. It's giving me an opportunity to share my experience, sharpen my public speaking skills, because I told y'all back in season 1, I am not a public speaker. Being in a leadership position in corporate America definitely has strengthened my communication skills, as well as going back to college. But doing this podcast, I'm literally speaking to the public and want to do so in a way where I can reach many audiences, not just one audience, right? So I say all that to say, you guys, that is example of a purposeful pivot. In both of those, pivoting from having a co-host, same thing with my daughter. So it just really feels good. And that leads me, like I said, to this episode, the power of a purposeful pivot. That power, what makes those purposeful pivots powerful is that you're moving, but you're not losing. So you're moving forward in a different way, and maybe a different direction, but you're not really losing. So that leads me into some other examples of purposeful pivot. Throughout my life, I've had various pivots, and I want to take the time right now to talk about some of them, just in case any of you out there might be experiencing some of these crossroads in your life, and you have to make a decision of where you want to pivot to. So I'll take you all back to, like, I don't know, the early 2000s. I was a bartender. Why was I a bartender? Because I had dropped out of high school. I had worked in some retail jobs until they, eventually figured out that I did not have a diploma, because that was something that was required to get hired. And a lot of times they would hire me just off my personality, right? Especially fashion retail stores. Like, I don't know if you guys remember Rave. They used to be in the mall. I worked at Rave. I also worked for a place called Prime Gear in Pittsburgh. Now, Prime Gear was owned by, I don't want to mess up their nationality, but I think they were Arabs. But those are some of my first jobs, retail. And so sales, just pretty much putting clothes out on the racks and helping customers. And we got a little commission when I worked at Prime Gear. But I say all that to say that was because I didn't have a high school diploma. I didn't really have many options. I dibbled and dabbled and sold a not proud of that. But, coming up where I came up, that was a means to make some money. I eventually got my GED. And after I got my GED, I got my first corporate job working at Dish Network. And working at Dish Network as a customer service representative, that was my first corporate job. And it felt so good, y'all. It felt so good to have benefits. It felt good to have a sense of security and stability for probably the first time in my life. As a matter of fact, right before I got that job, I actually had experienced some periods of homelessness where I was sleeping on friends' couches, cousins' couches. Eventually, I humbled myself and went to a shelter. And luckily, the shelter was right up the street from my job. So, it motivated me to save my money and get out of there as soon as possible. So I did that. And from there, that really started my corporate career. At that time in my life, I really didn't know what I wanted to do with my career. I didn't see it as a career. I just saw it as stable employment. On the side, I was still singing, and I still had dreams and aspirations of being a famous singer. So, I had this identity of being a singer. As if I wasn't singing at karaoke, I was singing in a band. If I wasn't singing in a band, I was in a competition or singing at some type of outdoor festival or community day. That pretty much was my identity. I was a bartender. Even when I worked at Dish Network, I still bartended on the weekends at this one bar called the High Rollers. Shout out to everybody that used to work with me at the High Rollers. That was a fun gig. It was fun. Um, let's see. Because of that, when you're in your 20s, that's reasonable. I mean, if you're not in college and actually already pursuing your career, that is typical, the nightlife, the retail, these entry level positions, and you're just living your best life. That was me in my 20s. Well, when I got pregnant with my daughter, that all changed. At Pretty Purposeful Events, event planning meets social impact. We plan, we host, we build community. Grounded in service, guided by values. From youth empowerment events to community outreach, we create spaces that bring people together with purpose. Let's create something purposeful together. Pretty Purposeful Events is based in Atlanta, Georgia, proudly serving nonprofit and community-based organizations nationwide. Virtual services available. For more information, visit us online at prettypurposefulevents.com. I continued working in corporate America, but I stopped bartending. I stopped singing with the band. I would still sing, but my focus became, being a mom. And that was a pivot. And it's so much that I lost friends or people that I thought were my friends. I will say that my social life changed drastically. I went from being very popular to being almost like an introvert. If I wasn't with my daughter's father while he was DJing, or if I wasn't singing somewhere, you wouldn't see me out in them streets. There wasn't nothing out there for me. People that knew me as the bartender singer had to adapt to the new me. My daughter's father and I, we split when she was 3. I ended up reuniting with my high school sweetheart, and we ended up getting married. I had to pivot again from being a baby mama to being a wife and having a, 2-income home. My daughter has, a father figure in the house consistently. And this lasted for almost, say, close to 5, 6 years, somewhere like that. During that time, I became a business owner. I had went back and pursued my, actually went back to go to college. This is my first time pursuing, a college degree. So I did a lot, during that marriage. But again, there were a lot of pivots for me, having to go from, I was still working full time, but when I started the business, that was a big change. It was actually a successful business. It was a family business. And again, there was a pivot, because I'm juggling motherhood, being a wife, working full time, going to school, and managing this business. I did everything, to be honest. My ex-husband, he did a lot of the labor. He took care of like getting the team together, and I took care of a lot of the administrative tasks, contacting the state. Now, I will say my ex did have to get a license to be able to inspect our inflatable bouncies. Those of you know, I used to have a company called Leaps and Laughs, and we rented bounce houses. That was a pivot because, again, the people around me had to adjust to this change that they weren't prepared for. They weren't ready for this new identity that I took on. Now I'm a business owner, and I have a successful business, and it's popping, right? Fast forward, the marriage, dissolved. And from there, I had to sell my house, but I thought it was the best thing to do because as a single mom with a daughter, I didn't feel comfortable being in that house. It was big. I didn't have any I didn't have neighbors like immediately next to me. There was like an empty lot. So it just felt like we stuck out. Through the years, many people had came to my house for, parties and different events that I had hosted. So I just felt like it was time for something different. And that house, my daughter's father actually had bought the house for me. It was a blessing to not have a mortgage, but I also felt complacent. I felt like because I didn't have a mortgage that I wasn't challenging myself to do more. And I didn't want to become lazy. I did not want especially after me and my, husband divorced. I did not want my daughter's father to, I'm just being honest, just keeping it real. We didn't live that far from one another. And I just did not want to stay in the neighborhood in that dynamic. If I was going to stay in that neighborhood, I would want to do it in a house that I bought myself. So some of you out there know about Maslow's hierarchy of needs. I may have mentioned it before, but it's a methodology. It speaks to, human needs, basic needs. And it's just a hierarchy of, the basic things that we need are, safety. And that's, a roof over your head, food, clothes, just your basics. And so a person like me who came from poverty and been homeless. I'm a single mom at this point, so I was not so quick to just want to jump out there and um be running a business full time by myself. I just knew that that wasn't a smart choice. Long story short, I ended up selling the house, sold the business, and eventually I decided to move to Georgia. At this point, I was growing in my career. I was becoming more educated. I was advancing up the corporate ladder, made it to a manager of a contact center. But I just didn't see any growth. And this was during Trump's first presidency. Okay. This was in 2017, 2018. So during his first presidency, I just did not feel that there was an opportunity for me to grow in that company, in that role. I had came to Atlanta, visited my cousin. I always had loved Atlanta, just because of the hospitality and diversity, especially. And, Black people are successful here. So I figured, it felt safe. It felt like it was a purposeful pivot. And here I am 7 years later. As a matter of fact, when this airs, my 7th-year anniversary of living in Georgia will be the very next day. So September 18th, I moved here. And I have no regrets. I have grown since I've been here. I have had some amazing epiphanies about life, about my family, about my identity, just growth upon growth upon growth. Now, financially, there's been growth, but I'll say that there's been some setbacks too, some that were outside of my control. Enough about me. I just wanted to share a little bit about how I've had to pivot in my life. And when I look back at those pivots, the one thing that I realize about all of them is that they were all intentional. And I'm proud of myself for that. What's the biggest pivot you've had to make in your life thus far? Let us know in the comments. All right. During times like these, we don't really have a choice but to be resilient. That's how we're gonna make it through this. But let's talk about it. Let's talk about it. Let's see here. Resilience doesn't mean whatever happened to you didn't break you. It just means that you figured out how to keep building anyway. When people talk about resilience, you usually hear them making it sound like it's like a badge of honor, like you never fell apart or you didn't crack under pressure, but that you just kept moving. But that's not really the truth. That's not really how resilience works. It doesn't mean that you weren't broken in your circumstances, but that you were able to persevere and move forward. And right now, what we're experiencing in our country, America is broken in a lot of ways, and we're watching our democracy crumble right before our eyes. For us, people of color, for poor folk, for old people, for young people, just trying to make it, every headline that we see on the news can feel like a new hit. And, another policy that just makes our life harder. Another example of hate and white supremacy being normalized. We've been here before. Our history as African Americans, as Black folks, as marginalized communities, is full of lived experiences where this system that was rigged has tried to break us. Many times we did break. Families are torn apart, mass incarceration, livelihoods stolen, innocent people, innocent Black men killed by the hands of police. But today, resilience looks like protecting your mental health, when we have this 24-hour news cycle, it never ends, right? It drains you. But resilience, it also looks like parents raising their kids to be aware of the dangers out there and to be confident in their worth. It looks like registering to vote, even when you don't believe it matters. And it looks like talking to your neighbor and cutting frivolous spending, y'all. That's the moment that we're in. The hate is visible, the pressure is real, but resilience isn't just about survival and taking hits. It is about being active and shaping what happens next. And so that's where the pivot becomes collective and it's not just personal. The kind of pivot that can change the direction of our country. At Pretty Purposeful Events, event planning meets social impact. We plan, we host, we build community. Grounded in service, guided by values. From youth empowerment events to community outreach, we create spaces that bring people together with purpose. Let's create something purposeful together. Pretty Purposeful Events is based in Atlanta, Georgia, proudly serving nonprofit and community-based organizations nationwide. Virtual services available. For more information, visit us online at prettypurposefulevents.com. This weekend, there were protests in D.C. It was the We Are All D.C. protest that took place. And I mean, they filled the streets. And it was peaceful. And thank God the military and the National Guard, they didn't mess with them. But it was an example of the type of collective pivoting that, that we need to, be on one accord at this time. And so where is the article? Okay, hold on one second. Let's see. Here we go. The protesters marched this past weekend in Washington, D.C. Over Trump's federal takeover of the city's police department and the deployment of National Guard troops to the Capitol. They were holding signs that read, "Protect D.C., Home Rule, and Stop the Trump Takeover." Yep, last month, Trump declared a crime emergency and ordered the federal government take control of D.C.'s police department. This is from CNN. Of the National Guard troops in D.C., Howard University student Stephanie Collins Stewart told CNN, "I honestly feel like it's a tactic, like they're trying to intimidate us. But I've been going here for school for the past few years, and I know what D.C. is like. It's pretty calm for the most part." Another protester, Christine Siloff, a public school teacher from Baltimore, told CNN she's concerned Trump will soon send the National Guard to her city, which he has threatened, arguing that it's just a show of force that's meant to intimidate people. So, yeah, it says here, there's got to be a more humane and more diplomatic way to deal with people who are undocumented. And the way they're doing it is very inhumane. There's so much more that could be done with the millions and millions of dollars that taxpayers are paying for occupation. The occupation of ICE and the National Guard, those are our tax dollars. This mission is costing roughly $1 million a day, experts estimated. That's ridiculous, y'all. $1 million a day? $1 million a day? $1 million a day to occupy DC. And then he's talking about occupying other cities. What do we do? Right? What powers do we have? What means do we have to fight back? And really staying in the know, staying informed as to what's going on, what changes are being made, different protests that are happening, different boycotts. I have not shopped at Target since last year sometime, so I'm so proud of myself. Whew. Walmart, on the other hand, is very close by. And since we decided to boycott, I've only made 2 trips in there, and it was for essentials. And Amazon is the one I'm working on now. I have canceled my Amazon membership, my Amazon Prime membership. Alexa keep on trying to get me to engage with her. I'm about to throw my Alexa device out the window somewhere. I asked Alexa the other day, I said, "Alexa, are you spying on me?" And she goes, no, we have privacy and all this stuff. I'm like, yeah, yeah, yeah. The Target boycott has been effective. The Walmart boycott also has been effective. And a lot of people are canceling their Amazon Prime memberships. So if you have not jumped on the boycott bandwagon, what are you waiting on? Because this is a purposeful, collective movement because our dollars is how these oligarchs are out here living their best life and trying to make the rest of us suffer. These are just some examples of the things that we can do. Every episode this season, we do touch on, staying involved, staying active, and staying informed. I want to move on now to Black women specifically because they have the highest unemployment rate right now. For women of color, Black women especially, pivots are often forced. And what do I mean by that? So we talked earlier about my life and how I've had to pivot. A lot of times there really isn't a choice. It's survival. Like either you pivot or you fall. But when we claim the pivot as our own, we change the power dynamic. This is what strengthens us. We become experts at pivoting. And this is why a lot of companies hire us in leadership roles because we are strategic, we are resilient, we're persistent, we're purposeful. We have lived experience to guide us. We're not afraid to take those risks because we know we've done more with less. Just put on the screen the US unemployment rate for Black women. And as you can see, it significantly jumped since Trump's been in office. And I want to actually take a look at the article. The unemployment rate for Black women rose sharply in August to 7.5% per government data released Friday morning. That's significantly higher than the overall unemployment rate and is partly a result of President Trump's cut to the federal workforce, which have disproportionately hit Black women. Also, the backlash with DEI has also affected Black women. In January of this year, Black women's unemployment rate was at 5.4%, and the overall rate was 4%. Now, the rate for Black women has spiked more than 2 percentage points, with the overall rate has crept up only by 0.3%. That's crazy. That's crazy. Overall, Black women make up 12% of the federal workforce, near double their share in the overall labor force. Now, my thing is, I'm just concerned like how many Black women are still employed within the federal government because I would just feel so weird knowing that, any day could be the day. And what are they going to do? Like I just feel at this point our civil rights are not protected because the Department of Justice is oversees, all of the offices that are there for equality, the EEOC, the Office of Civil Rights, like just anything that has to do with equity and inclusion and civil rights, the Department of Justice oversees. And so at this point, it's sad, but y'all, like the protection is just not there for us. It's a very sad reality. We really have to the people that are still employed at the federal within the federal government. I'm praying. I wouldn't even want to work in that environment because here's the thing, in order for you to survive, not thrive, but in order for you to survive in those type of environments, like you're going to have to do the dirty work. You're going to be doing the firing that they don't want to do. There's so many different departments and agencies within the government that we just have to take it one day at a time at this point. But, to any of the sisters that are in the government, my thoughts and prayers are with you that you can find something better and that you can get out of there on your own versus just being fired. You see how, because of this situation, Black women are now, even the ones that are still within the federal workforce, they still have to pivot and they have to be purposeful about it. And this is not something that they thought they would have to do. They literally are being forced to pivot. It's like when the system says no, we pivot not just for ourselves, but everybody that's dependent on us. So when we own the narrative, like right now, Everybody, not just the Black women in the federal workforce, but all of us that are out here working could potentially be targeted or discriminated against. We have to choose the narrative. Wherever we do decide to go, whatever we decide to do, we have to own it and say, I'm choosing to do this. You have to flip the script. What was meant to box us in or oppress us becomes a stage for us to expand and grow on. And that's what we've been doing. And they know it. They're fully aware that we are capable of building from nothing. We only get better in time. We've done it so many times. We're experts at pivoting. And so we need to own that. We need to embrace that. A pivot for women of color doesn't just disrupt one glass ceiling, it actually challenges two. There's sexism and then there's racism. When women of color, when we do claim our pivots, it shows younger women and those who are looking up to us, those who depend on us, that transformation is possible through chaos. It can chip away at the stereotypes and it rewrites what leadership and creativity and strength and unity and success, what it looks like. When we're forced to pivot, it often can push us into entrepreneurship or a side hustle. It brings out that creativity, it stretches that creative mind. And that pressure has birthed some of the most innovative brands, movements, and cultural shifts as we know it in this country. So, I don't know. Are you someone who previously worked in the federal workforce, or are you currently, in your industry concerned about your job security? Let us know in the comments below. Information sharing in real time is so critical. If I could do this podcast live and daily, I would, but I just can't. So I can only give y'all one podcast a week. Even doing that, it is challenging. It does require a lot of time management and planning, but I am committed to bringing this, information to you all and any insights that I gather throughout the week with each new episode. So moving on is you can't be trying to be a perfectionist while you're pivoting. Pivoting is very clear, very intentional. You have to also be flexible when you're pivoting. I mean, heck, pivoting itself requires adaptability. So you cannot expect that everything is going to be perfectly, the way that you envision it. And that's the reason why you have to be open to the possibility that you might have to pivot within a pivot, right? It doesn't look the same or feel the same for everyone, and won't look to feel the same each time you have to do it. A lot of times we might stall on pivoting because we think that we have to have everything perfectly lined up. For instance, like going to another job, you think you got to have the perfect resume. If you have your own business, you think you have to have the right funding in order to start it. Or you might think you might need to have the perfect appearance to get a job or to have an opportunity. But owning the pivot is really saying to yourself that even if it's messy, even if it's imperfect, this is my new lane and I'm going to own it. So nowadays, a lot of people have platforms, TikTok is like the platform these days that is where people can just, be themselves. With platforms like TikTok, pivots are no longer silent. Now, I'll say for me, your girl, one thing about me, I have not pivoted publicly a lot of times. Like I don't tell people that I'm pivoting. I usually share that I've pivoted after. That's just from my experience. Now, I'm not going to say that you shouldn't pivot in public. I'm just saying from my own experience, I have always tried to pivot privately. And then after I've succeeded, then I share. But nowadays we have a lot of our, Gen Z who is very, tech digitally driven. And so, they kind of are driving this whole TikTok trend of making a career out of content creation. There's always been content creators, y'all. The movie directors, the producers, the actors, the singers. There's always been content creators, but now even what I'm doing right now, I'm a content creator. Not full time, but there are some people who have made content creation their main source of income, their primary source of, their primary employment. Sometimes with that, on TikTok when they're being super vulnerable, right? Asking strangers to support them. The visibility, it can kind of shift what pivoting looks like. And that's what we're experiencing right now. I mean, we've seen people on the side of the road, who might be homeless or having a hard time. Person can really feel, ashamed to be out on the side of the road, having to ask someone for help. People wondering, like, do they really need help, or are they just out here trying to scam us? Now, the same thing is on TikTok. You have people asking strangers for money. And like, I mean, some of these videos, y'all, look, I'm just going to show y'all.
Y'all just on here trying to get some, raise some money so I can get me and my kids something to eat and pay my rent.
Day. I'm sorry. This is what I do every day. This is what we do every day. This is our job. This is something we literally hop in on every day. Deal with people who don't know us from the lick of who don't really want to know us at times. We deal with people who troll. We deal with people who talk shit about us. We deal with this each and every day. Respect y'all to the best ability that we can and constantly push for y'all to understand us. This is our job. We sit here on hours entertaining people. Then we have to post from here to YouTube, from YouTube to Instagram, from Instagram to Facebook. Meaning this is a job. Content creating is a job. For all the content creators out there, you have a job, baby, because you still have people that actually love to see you get on here and talk to them. There are people that have been asking us to go live that love to talk to us. So yes, this is a job.
Can somebody help out?
I don't know how I'm gonna do this. Like, I'm tired. Like, I'm not even lying. I'm so tired. Trying to figure out this money. Now, last night, I was gonna go dancing to try to make the rest of this money. Like, last minute, like at 12, like, or 1. I don't know, like at around 12:40 and stuff, I left. Because the clubs closed at like 2 in the morning and stuff. So I was like, you know what? I'm gonna go dancing. But I ain't gonna lie, y'all. For those who have like relationship with the Lord and stuff like that, it's hard. The whole time that I was like headed there and stuff, I'm like, this is very degrading. I don't want to do it. Like, I overcame like going through stuff like this. Like, I just kept getting convicted and stuff because I'm just like, if I do this, I'm causing, I'm gonna feel dirty.
Whew, that's heavy. Wow. Let me just start by saying, if you're someone out there who is a content creator full time and you are asking for help on social media, I don't judge you. I don't, you have a platform, you have a voice. A closed mouth does not get fed. Let me just say that. Because I have seen some other content creators, criticizing people. And I just feel like we are living in some unprecedented times. And so if people already have had barriers and have had systemic racism and oppression impacting them in ways that some of them haven't even really made that connection, that is the reason why they've had such a hard life. On a micro level, like on a macro level, yeah, we know there's racism, we know there's systemic racism, but I mean on a micro level, like how strategic these systems are set up to make people fail. So much red tape and bureaucracy. I'll say this: the first lady that was in the video, I get it. Content creation for some is a full-time job, but if you are seeking help, you can't be attacking the people that you want to help you. You definitely have to humble yourself. Nobody has to help you out, right? That's just like if those of you who are in Atlanta, y'all know about the water boys. If you're driving down the street, there's been times when I've gotten water. I didn't need no water, but I just wanted to help them out. But you hear on the news that they harassing people and things like that, and it's like, it makes people not want to support them. And that's sad because what they're doing is entrepreneurial and it's better than selling drugs. When I first saw them, I'm like, oh my gosh, this is so admirable. Like they really out here selling water and putting in the hours and putting in the work and just like a homeless person on the side of the road, there could be some shame in that. But when they start harassing people and then scamming people, like, no, that's not cool. On the other hand, this young lady who is here in the video that was speaking about, how she was thinking about going out to the clubs, and possibly dancing, I guess stripping, right? and how because she has a relationship with God, it makes her feel nasty. Like, that's the type of transparency that will get you help, because a lot of people can relate to that. I'm gonna sit here right now and say I can relate to that, sis. When I was your age, and heck, even now, listen, none of us are exempt from having to do something strange for a little change. Friends with benefits exist. Okay, don't get it twisted. But she is really struggling with her moral compass, like her spirit, like it's telling her this is not for you. There's no human should have to do that. If somebody wants to go strip and that is their chosen profession and that's what they want to do, more power to you. But this young lady is doing to pay her rent, and she's in a tight situation. Now, I don't know what led up to this, but I did hear her say that, she overcame this before. I don't know enough about this young lady to say what her lifestyle is that would get her into this situation. But I tell you this, for someone like me who has 3 degrees, has a full-time job, it's still hard out here. It is still hard out here. I have to say that this young lady and others like her who are in that situation, who are facing these tough decisions, this is her thinking about, okay, how can I pivot? And these are the options that she has. And this is not just her, there's a lot of young, especially Black girls, young women of color, that they will resort to, working or stripping to make a couple dollars, and it puts them in a very vulnerable situation. It puts them in a situation where they could be trafficked, you know, um, abused, used, abused, raped, all these things. So again, my heart goes out to really everybody that is experiencing a hardship right now. But if you're someone who is faced with that type of decision, this is a young lady. Imagine a young men out there who might be been having a difficult time getting a job, can't get a job, got a job, got fired, whatever the case. What are the choices they got? Are they going to go sell their body? Some of them do. Are they going to go rob someone? They're going to go defraud someone? Like, this is how the crime happens. What this administration is doing right now, everybody's going to feel the pressure. If they're up here, the oligarchs, the billionaires, right? And everybody else is underneath. What they're doing right now is this, the pressure. And so you have these people down here that are below the poverty line. And then you got people like me who's in the middle class, right? And there's levels of that, right? Those of us that are here, what's going to happen? What's going to happen? If these people are robbing and stealing so that they can eat, and these people here are taking away, what's going to happen? What's going to happen? I've just had to give y'all that visual so that we all are aware of what's going on and what is at risk. So I can't be judging this young lady here. Even the one in the first video, she may not, her delivery wasn't the best. But at the same time, don't laugh at nobody's hardship, because it could be you. Don't be out here criticizing and judging people, because we all collectively right now are going through something that is not normal. God forbid, these people who are experiencing or facing homelessness, already dealing with that stress. And then on top of that, just the thought of having a president who's a wannabe king, that on top of that is even more of a strain on one's mental health. So I'm gonna need for those out there making videos, commenting on these TikTokers, to have some grace, please. Y'all are making content off of their hardship, and that is not cool. I like information, and if this is what is trending, if people are making content about people begging, then I want to know what's going on. Like, what is the big deal about it? But I see what it is now. Everybody's situation is different, but in these times that we're living in right now, we all need to have grace, because that person that was already struggling, it's just layers of stuff. Y'all just need to have grace. Y'all remember just, 6-7 months ago when ICE was out here arresting the Mexicans, there was a lot of people, Black people online, talking about the Mexicans, laughing at them and laughing at their pain, and, making fun of them because they voted for Trump, right? Yeah, I ain't gonna lie, that little video, I will vote For Donald Trump. I ain't gonna lie. When I seen that, it was viral. I laughed. I did.
I will vote for Donald Trump.
It's been happening frequently at the 333 Miami Avenue Federal Court building. Janet Correa's husband was detained this week. According to her immigration lawyer, he has already been placed on expedite removal.
So now that Trump has ICE on them, now they're trying to come after the Black community. It's not funny anymore. They say, oh, you want to stay in the house? You don't want to come out? We're going to come in your neighborhood. We're going to terrorize you.
To allow this kind of savagery to destroy our society anymore.
President Trump late yesterday establishing a task force in Memphis to crack down on crime, similar to actions recently taken in the nation's capital.
The effort will include the National Guard as well as the FBI, ATF, DEA, ICE, Homeland Security investigations, and the U.S. Marshals.
And that is like oppression in real time. Like they in your face oppressing you, making you not want to go outside, making you not want to, enjoy life with your family, go into the park, have a cookout, ride your ATVs or ride your motorcycles. You don't even want to engage in extracurricular activity because they don't want to see you having fun. They don't want to see you living life. They want you to be suffering. That's the vibe that this administration is giving right now. Is that they don't want people to have joy because they know one thing about Black people is that we don't have to have anything, but one thing we're going to have is some joy, and they can't take that. And so the sad part is that they will continue and continue and continue until they just, to their satisfaction, until we take our last breath, we could be the most joyful person. But if they know that they have made you suffer, that's their joy. At Pretty Purposeful Events, event planning meets social impact. We plan, we host, we build community. Grounded in service, guided by values. From youth empowerment events to community outreach, we create spaces that bring people together with purpose. Let's create something purposeful together. Pretty Purposeful Events is based in Atlanta, Georgia, proudly serving nonprofit and community-based organizations nationwide. Virtual services available. For more information, visit us online at prettypurposefulevents.com. So before we get out of here, I'm just going to quickly recap what we touched on. We talked about the power of a purposeful pivot today. We looked at why pivots are more than just survival moves, that they are moments that we choose to reroute before the world reroutes us. We talked about resilience, not being a badge of honor, but as real work towards rebuilding even after we are broken. We named how, for women of color, pivots are often forced by barriers and systemic oppression, but claiming them as ours shifts the power dynamic. We reminded ourselves that when we own our pivots, it's not about perfection. It's about having the courage to say that this is the lane I'm in now. And finally, we recognize that sometimes our pivots aren't even about us. They're about showing the next generation what's possible when we refuse to stay stuck. Pivots are personal, they're collective, and they're political. They're the bridges that we build when the old road no longer leads where we're called to go. Pretty Purposeful Podcast is more than just content. It's a community. It's one that I take pride in building. And although it's a slow start, at the end of the day, it's really about the impact that those who get something of value from the content, that's what it's about. It's also about your voice, your story, and your engagement. So if you haven't already, please go ahead and subscribe. Join our purposeful community. Stay connected because we're claiming pivots today so that we can shape the future that we all want and deserve. Follow us on all of our socials. We're on Instagram, on TikTok. You want to follow my personal page? I'm on TikTok. Also, drop a comment below. Let us know what you thought about the episode. Let us know of any pivots that you are currently making and what resilience looks like for you today. If you would like to be a guest on this season of the Pretty Purposeful Podcast, here are some of the topics that we will be covering this season. All right, Purposeful Family. So before we wrap this episode, I just want to remind you all to check out our website, prettypurposefulpodcast.com. There you can find the latest PPP updates. You can register to be a guest. We also have community resources available on our Purpose Hub. We're living through some traumatic and trying times right now, and it's more important than ever to lean on one another. And there's no shame in asking for help, reaching out, or just saying, I need somebody. We're stronger when we move together. Until next time, Purposeful Family, remember, it's okay to be pretty, but even better to be pretty purposeful.